have homeowners insurance and a hurricane hits. The winds and the rains come. There's damage to your home, but you know the storm will blow over and you have coverage. So no worries, right? You could be very wrong.
Welcome to Justice Counts, the podcast that goes beyond the law to what's important to you. Equal justice for all is a guidepost for our nation, but how do we achieve that? Here are your hosts, writer-commentator Bob Gaddy and novelist-attorney Mark M. Bello.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Today, Mark Bello and I are with William F. Chip Merlin Jr. He's founder and president of the Merlin Law Group. Chip has dedicated his practice to representing insurance policyholders in disputes with insurance companies nationwide. Chip was noted as the Babe Ruth of Hurricane lawyers in the Asbury Park Press for his work on behalf of 23 municipalities and hundreds of policyholders following Superstorm Sandy. The Tampa Bay Times dubbed him the master of disaster for his nationwide catastrophe work and helping policyholders following Hurricane Katrina. Master of disaster, I love that. Anyway, Chip also is the author of the book entitled Pay Up, Preventing a Disaster with Your Own Insurance Company. His motto is Justice for Policyholders, as he and his firm work to help people get the recovery they deserve from bad faith insurance companies. So today, Mark Bello and I will talk with Chip about being prepared to fight with your insurance company after a disaster. Chip, I hope it never comes to that, but can you set the stage for us a little bit?
Well, sure. Most people go and they buy insurance. They buy it year after year from the same insurance company. Most of the time, most people never even think about, what's in their insurance contract. You just keep paying a premium, whether it be for your home, your business, your auto, and it just goes round and around this way. And the insurance company's collecting premium and putting money away into the bank. And then one day, a tragedy happens. A catastrophe happens, and the clients I represent end up reading their insurance policy for the first time. What they find out is that they don't understand the insurance policy that they've written, that they hope they have the insurance and the right amount of coverage, and that whatever catastrophe or tragedy occurred, that they're going to be treated right and paid for everything that's going to fix it, and so that they're going to be back, and is at least the same position they were beforehand. And unfortunately, that often doesn't happen. It's the reason why I wrote the book. It's the reason why this is what I do for a living. And I've been doing it, since the early 1980s now. So what I hope to accomplish through the book that I wrote was give some tips to people. Everything from, how do you pick your insurance agent? If you have a loss, how do you pick an attorney if you need an attorney? How do you pick a contractor? How do I go about dealing with the insurance company? How do I know if the insurance company is ripping me off or not? All these types of things I think go through the minds of the clients that I've represented. And this is after talking with thousands of people through the various stages of all kinds of different calamities that happen. And this is what I do for a living.
I just want to make sure that our listeners understand who you are and what we're talking about. A person gets into an auto accident, let's say, and they're fighting with an insurance company against the person who caused the accident. That is not what you do. What you're talking about, and this is what's so important about what you do, and that people understand what you do, just so our listeners get it, we're talking about homeowners and business claims against our own insurance companies, right?
It's against your own insurance company. So it's not against the person who may have caused the accident and that insurance company. This is a claim against your own insurance company. So I've represented a little old lady who came in after her car was stolen, and some teenagers joyrided it and went out into the middle of some cow pasture. And by the time we got back, it was completely torn up. It had mechanical problems, had to be cleaned up in the whole bit. She walks in my office and her one complaint was, my muffler before this thing happened didn't have a hole in it, and it's got a hole in it now. And it's going to cost this is ridiculous, $49.25 to fix. And I call the adjuster at CNA saying, this 76-year-old lady who's your customer says you didn't fix the muffler. You fixed everything else. Why don't you fix the muffler? Chip, how do we know that the muffler didn't have a hole beforehand? And I said, well, because she says it didn't have a hole beforehand. Obviously, there was some rust in it, and it went through this hard joyride, and it's what busted it. And she said, you'll never sue us over $49.25, which I proceeded to do in Florida because we have some very strong pro-consumer laws that allow me to take a very small case like that. I've also represented the Port of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, where originally, the amount that the insurance company was paying was $25 million. And eventually I got hired 2 years after the fact, and they brought our firm in, and 11 months later, we're collecting $132 million against Affiliated FM on their Hurricane Katrina claim. So I've represented both the small individuals, very large governmental entities, but it's against your own insurance company when they're not treating you right.
And that's my point. The average citizen thinks, why would I ever need a lawyer for a claim I filed against my own insurance company? I paid my premiums all these years. A claim should be an easy process, right? You just don't understand as a citizen that the filing of a claim against an insurance company, rather than writing a check for a premium, is a declaration of war, right?
Well, it can be, because there's a lot of small print in the insurance contract that nobody reads. And again, if you read it, you would never understand it. You almost have to do what I do for a living and study it, try to somehow figure it out. Judges disagree about what some of the terms of the insurance policy really mean. And you have all these myriad of circumstances that happen out there. And unfortunately, some insurance companies in this day and age, rather than giving the benefit of the doubt to their customer and affording the payment, I think a lot of times because of profit motives that the insurance companies have, and competitive profit motives, goals that the management's got to reach to satisfy the shareholders and for the management to get their bonuses, take the opposite approach, and they don't pay at that moment of truth.
Profits over people, as we say in the trade.
Chip, are there some notable insurance companies that are particularly bad at this?
Yeah.
Tell me who they are.
I mean, so every day I write a blog, on insurance law, property insurance law. Today's blog talked about the Texas municipal risk pool. And while that might work for the various cities and municipalities and school districts regarding their liability claim exposure, when they have their own insurance claim, whether it be a hurricane, whether it be hail damage, they've got a enemy in their own risk pool. And I literally wrote about that today, warning cities and municipalities and giving a clear example, not on a case that we're involved in, but another case, that is out there about the risk pool even said, if you disagree and you don't like the money that we paid, you can't even sue us. You don't have a right to even sue us in the state of Texas. So it took 3.5 years for the city of Hidalgo, just to try to get to an alternative dispute resolution process with their insurance company. And they had, a claim of $7 million, of which they had been paid $250,000 by the risk pool. So I think a lot of people think, well, if the bigger you are, the more you're going to be able to push the insurance company around. That's not necessarily certain. There are instances all the time, whether a small individual or corporation, that have significant problems of getting prompt and full payment from insurance companies. So much so that some of the commercial clients I've told, especially if you're in an area like Florida, Texas, or a coastal area, you should have lines of credit set up so you can make the instantaneous payments. The contractor is going to fix you up, because you can't expect the insurance company to start really making full payment for those 6 months. And, most businesses can't last that long. So it changed a lot.
I'm sorry, can we focus a little bit on the consumer and on what the everyday person needs to worry about when they're in the path of a hurricane and the hurricane hits their house? They check their insurance policy. Then what?
Well, they should be, if they have any damage at all, they should almost be calling as the hurricane's going on, because like in Louisiana right now, if you didn't call right away to get an appointment, for an adjuster, it's been taking some people 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks before an adjuster gets there because they have so many tens of thousands of claims that are going on. And so you can't just trust that the adjuster is going to get out there. Today, I tell people, right after the storm happens, and after you make that notice to your insurance company, you got damage, take your cell phone and go around and videotape everything, not just around your house where all the damage is, but everybody else surrounding. So you can show that it's not just your home, but it's everybody. Insurance adjusters and the desk adjusters tend to get skeptical. Many of them are adjusting the claim virtually. They're not even there on the scene. The person who shows up on the scene, a desk adjuster, might be there for an hour and then off he goes. So these photographs and videotapes that people can make of their own homes as soon as damage happens becomes so important later on to help verify that there has been damage to a certain amounts, and then these are the estimates for that damage.
So let me ask you this: if a storm hits and it takes 3 weeks for an adjuster to get there, does that mean that the consumer, the homeowner, has to leave things as they are until the adjuster gets there? They can't start working on fixing the damage and making their house habitable again?
Well, the first thing, you do have to show the people the damaged property, but you also have a same duty to make sure you mitigate against further damage. And typically what that means, the first thing you should do is make certain that the home is safe from the elements, so that if you got holes in the walls, ceilings, roofs, and it's leaking, you need to do something to try to fix that. And that's an obligation that everybody, and justice typically requires you mitigate the amount of damage. Don't let further damage go on. You should, have self-help. And as a matter of fact, to the extent most policies will even pay for those mitigation efforts. So you should go out and do that. That's one of the first things after you make certain it's safe to go there. And I'm not kidding around. In some of the areas of Louisiana that had snakes and alligators, I think there was even a news report of somebody going back to their home and getting in a tussle with an alligator and having his arm bitten off. So, it's after whatever catastrophe it is, I tell people, if you're going back to your home, if you've gone somewhere else, you've already called the agent, you can't trust the adjuster is going to get there. Make certain it's safe for you to walk around. There's a lot of nails and every kinds of other thing out there. If it's a fire scene, you just don't go walking in to it without some type of breathing apparatus, because there's a lot of carcinogenic material in fire dwellings. If you had a wildfire that knocked you out, and then start taking photographs and videotape before you almost do anything else, and then you start to mitigate the damage as well as try to start cleaning it up. But you got the evidence about what it looked like before you've done it, because you videotaped and photographed everything. The insurance company wants you to get back, reconstructing, repairing, and things like that, because most insurance policies are also paying for your additional living expense, and they want to have the reconstruction and the cleanup and the repair starting place as soon as possible, so that you can move back into a damaged structure.
Okay, all right. So I live in South Carolina, right? And when I bought my home, the builder gave me these big old pieces of plywood to put over my windows if a hurricane struck, right? Well, these big old pieces of plywood took up a lot of space in my garage, so I got rid of them. Now, am I in trouble with the insurance company if the hurricane strikes, my house gets damaged, I get all this water damage in my house from the hurricane because the windows blew in and I didn't put up my plywood hurricane shutters? Am I in trouble?
Well, so long as if it's plywood that you're talking about, then the answer is no. If you do have hurricane shutters, though, and you're required to have hurricane shutters, which is not plywood, but actually manufactured shutters, you're supposed to have the shutters in working and operable condition.
We don't have them.
So then you don't have anything to worry about. And for what it's worth, putting up tape on windows does no good whatsoever. I don't know whoever thought that one up, but it doesn't do any. There's all kinds of studies. You go around to these places and people have windows taped up. The tape does nothing on windows other than you putting tape on a window. Okay. I have no idea where that ever came from.
Okay.
Chip, I've got three questions to follow up what Bob said. First of all, hurricane shutters lower your insurance premiums, right? So the reason you need to use your shutters if you have them is because you got a discount on your policy for having them, correct?
But hear me out. So when you put in these hurricane shutters, suppose you put $15,000 worth of hurricane shutters up around your home. Okay. So
Right.
you get a discount on your premium, but you also have to add on the $15,000 in value for the hurricane shutters. So sometimes it comes out to be a wash, depending upon how valuable the rest of your home is. For what it's worth, it doesn't necessarily lower your premiums in total, but it does help mitigate against damage. And I think that as a society is something that we should try to promote in hurricane areas. And that is, how do we build our structures? How do we make our structures hardened so that they will withstand forces of nature and you don't have any loss at all? You know, that's the best loss you have, because in the long term, you know, it helps reduce the insurance premiums. Insurance, a lot of people, just because I sue insurance companies, think I hate insurance companies. I don't. I love the insurance product. I don't necessarily, a lot of times I hate the actions of insurance adjusters who don't pay. But if insurance is a risk pool that all of us are involved in, we should be thinking of ways that provide incentives for all of us to harden our buildings and our structures so we don't have losses, or the losses are minimized in the long term. And for everybody socially, it helps reduce premiums so that we can afford to have better insurance coverage.
A hurricane is a natural disaster, obviously. There are certain things out there, wildfires, storms, etc., that are, quote, natural disasters. Does a person have to have a specific type of coverage to be covered for a natural disaster in their policy?
Well, so, you know, if you have a mortgage, a conventional mortgage, they require you to have a certain type of policy, and it's an all risk broad form policy, which covers all risks unless they're excluded. You can buy lesser forms of insurance that are called named peril policies. And I try to tell people you want to keep away from named peril policy. If it covers just fire, wind, vandalism, riot, you know, various things. You could have all kinds of other things that happen to your home. You know, when your roof breaks, you know, for any particular reason and water starts coming through it, does your policy cover you for water damage or not? Many policies don't if they're on a named peril basis. So trying to get a policy that is known as an all risk policy, providing the broader type of risk is the best type of insurance policy for any type of, whether it's a business or a home.
Here in Michigan, though, we don't have hurricanes. We've had a tornado or two, but no hurricanes. So Bob is in South Carolina. Does he have to have some kind of specific hurricane coverage versus what I have in Michigan, or is it automatic? Is it just a, quote, storm, unquote?
So in some areas, because there's such a high hurricane risk, and these are usually along the coastal island areas, the barrier island areas of the Carolinas, down in the Florida Keys, some areas of Texas along the coast, the insurance companies refuse to insure for, quote, windstorm, and you have to go buy separate insurance for the windstorm coverage. But those are particular to those areas. The truth of the matter is that wherever you live, there's going to be a certain actuarial risk that's assigned to it. So while you don't have hurricanes, you might have these outrageous snow days that come in and plump 6 feet of snow on your roof, and you have ice damming problems that he doesn't have because you live up there. So people have different problems depending upon, you know, where they live in the country that actually, you know, go into whatever your rate's going to be. Most of the policies, though, in most areas are all risk insurance policies, and most policies will cover for things like hurricane, except when you get in those areas that if every single time there's a hurricane, like in the Keys, all the insurance companies would go broke. And so they've refused to insure many of those buildings, and people end up going into what are typically sponsored, you know, risk pools. Carolinas have risk pools as well as Texas. Even Florida's got an insurance company that's state sponsored to an extent to help out with that high wind event that comes in. In California, they have certain earthquake coverages. Most insurance companies won't cover it unless you go buy a special endorsement, you know, for that. These are disasters, whether they're man-made or not. You know, wildfire can be both started by an arsonist, or it can be just from lightning out in California. And we're experiencing devastating wildfires, with people now not being able to get insurance at all because the insurance companies have taken such a hit over the last, it's been about 5 years. We've had just drought after drought and wildfire after wildfire going on in California. Some insurance companies say we just can't make any money here anymore, and they're literally pulling out of the market. So, every region has its own issue going on. You have to know what type of coverages are at play where you live. You better have a really good agent to make certain that they're insuring you to the best that you've got. And I don't mean just picking somebody because of a jingle on a television, or somebody down at the country club or just a friend of yours. I mean, pick somebody out. I always tell people, pick somebody out that really has credentials after their name. If they have a whole bunch of different letters after their name, they're showing a real interest in what they're doing for a living. And I would suggest people spend a little bit of time. It doesn't take a lot, and even just a half an hour, a year with your insurance agent to say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. I got divorced. I married my granddad's living with us, or my dad who used to live with us is living somewhere else in a different, because your circumstances change and all those affect the type of insurance needs you have. Most people don't know that. And that's why having an agent that you meet with at least on an annual basis to go through those things, to make certain coverages are taken care of. So when kids move out, you get divorced or whatever's happening, you're going to buy a second house, you're properly insured, for these types of events that are going on in most people's lives.
May I also suggest that the price of the policy should not be your primary focus. It should be the coverage of the policy. You look at Jake from State Farm telling you how State Farm has great rates. Why don't you tell the people about State Farm and Katrina and how they handled those claims?
Yeah, and how they left all the what I call slab claims, because the only thing that was left out there was a slab, and State Farm denied thousands of claims down there. We were real active in that litigation in Mississippi. I had spent 3 years living in Waveland, Mississippi as a kid, because my father was stationed out at the Stennis test facility. He was in the Coast Guard, and they were building these, monster buoys. But I got to know the people, and this was just a few years after Hurricane Camille had struck. But in comes Katrina, and it just completely wiped out the Mississippi coast. It looked like God had came in and just blown everything away, or washed everything away after the wind did significant damage. And then the insurance companies came back and said, well, it's all flood damage and not much wind whatsoever.
Right. A storm is a flood, right?
So, it's sort of like, go collect it all from your flood carrier. Since we don't cover for flood, we only cover for, we cover for a hurricane, but we don't cover for the floodwaters that coming in, which is true, but you still cover for the hurricane winds, which they weren't paying for. So we were in some very significant litigation with a number of insurance companies. It wasn't just State Farm, but State Farm had the majority of the market. And that's a story in of itself about everything that happened, after that I was part of at the time. Maybe I should write a book about that, because it really was some bizarre times. Dickie Scruggs had gotten involved with it, and in the middle of all the litigation, it comes out Mr. Scruggs had been involved bribing some judge, and the FBI arrested him. Eventually he's convicted, and his son's convicted, and they lose their bar license from it. And he's a very prominent, figure in those areas. But this was all during the middle of the litigation against State Farm.
Chip, I just want to ask you a real basic question. And it's personal, but I mentioned there are a number of people would have the same question. And that is, where I live in South Carolina, I live about, 5 miles from the beach. It's across the inland waterway. And it's not in an area that has ever, to my knowledge, actually been evacuated or forced evacuation, although we've had hurricanes where they said, well, it'd be a good idea for you to evacuate. Well, I never have. At any rate, in addition to my homeowner's insurance, I purchased flood insurance. Now, a number of my neighbors haven't done that. They felt like, they're across of the inland waterway. Their risk of actual flooding is pretty low. And in the community where I live, I have to say that we've not had any indication of any kind of flooding at all. Even the morning after a hurricane, you can go out and the streets are dry. But still, I hang on to my flood insurance. Is that a good idea?
This is what I tell people when I get asked that question. I said, this is the way insurance works. If you don't have the insurance, I bet you absolutely something bad's going to happen to you. But if you buy the insurance, God knows you'll never have the loss. And you'll keep asking yourself, why?
Ain't that the truth?
Exactly.
It's sort of the reason why I try to buy more life insurance, because I know that way I'll just keep living. So
You'll live forever.
That's just kind of the way it works. And so my advice to you is generally, yes, if even there's a fairly remote chance on flood, because you never know when that flood's going to come. And I've represented so many people saying all kinds of reasons why they didn't have flood insurance. I mean, Katrina was probably the worst. I remember one lady asked, I said, you bought the bare minimum of flood. You bought $25,000 of flood insurance. Why didn't you buy, $250,000? And she said, it just never floods here, Chip. It's never flooded before. And that's what I get, told. And they didn't think about the storm surge from the hurricane going in literally 12 miles.
Yeah.
I flew in on a private plane into Stennis Air Force Base. I was Stennis test facility afterwards, which is about 10 miles away. And we were coming in, we had a number of car dealerships that we were representing right away. But when I came in, the water level, at the airplane hangars were 8 feet high. This is 10 miles away from the coast. So I could see the water 8 feet, guys. I mean, so storm surge sometimes goes miles inland, and you need just the right type of storm that to hit it. It doesn't happen often, but it happens enough. Even in South Carolina, this is crazy, but I've been involved in earthquake claims in South Carolina. People don't think about earthquakes in South Carolina, but at the University of South Carolina, there's a whole professor that studies nothing but earthquakes that go on in South Carolina. Should you have earthquake coverage or not? Most people, the answer is no. But if you had $100 million structure, that's financed and things like that, I might think about buying that coverage for the earthquake just as a hedge.
Yeah.
So and the truth of the matter is, with rising sea levels and the ferocity of some of our storms, especially hurricanes, that's going to be your biggest thing, is that rivers get backed up. You don't have as much leeway as what you used to in the past, because the rivers are already higher to begin with. And the next thing you know, the storm is coming here, and it doesn't take long for floodwaters to go through your house. Your neighbors will be saying, "Oh my God, why didn't I buy the flood insurance?" And you'll be happy for it. But again, chances are it'll never happen to you, and that's the best thing that could ever happen. Okay.
Yeah. Well, some people would, believe that their homeowners insurance will just cover if they get flooded out. It's covered. Not true, right?
Not true. No, almost every single homeowner's policy excludes flood. Most of them, almost all of them, exclude earthquake. You have to buy those coverages separately. And as I just said, it's weird, some of the places that have earthquake, and it's relatively inexpensive to buy. If you live in California, it's expensive to buy earthquake insurance, especially if you live in San Francisco or Los Angeles. But if you live in many places in South Carolina, it's dirt cheap. And until recently, it was dirt cheap in places like Dallas and Oklahoma City, until all of a sudden the fracking was going on. And the next thing you know, we're having all these earthquakes that are really induced by fracking, is what the science has shown. Wow. But we represented a school district with a $30 million claim just last year in a dispute out in Oklahoma with an earthquake, where most people would never think about it, but the fracking sort of started it up.
So, your homeowner's insurance company coverage will cover you for water damage that comes from the sky, right?
Yes.
But not water damage that comes from below.
Well, but it's not going to cover you if you leave all your property, your personal property hanging outside during a thunderstorm. It's usually there's got to be something that causes a breakage of something that allows the water to get in.
Yeah. Okay.
So, again, everybody has a responsibility to try to keep their stuff, safe as possible. So,
Right. So,
it's got to be a burst, not a seep.
Yeah. But I mean, if a hurricane hits, your roof blows off, and everything gets soaked inside the house, you're covered from your homeowner's policy, correct?
You're covered. Now, how much they're going to pay is a whole different deal. So, But
well, how does that work? How does that work?
Insurance companies send out cat adjusters typically after a hurricane, and these are individuals that do catastrophe work, and you might see that person one time.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks later, you might see a different one show up. Instead of you got to tell that guy or woman the entire story, you could end up having 5 catastrophe adjusters before you start really getting into full payment, which is, again, the reason why the collection of all of your evidence, the videos, the photographs, I hate to say that it's a do it yourself type of deal, but I think the people that come out best are those that are taking that type of evidence, and it really is evidence, to show others that you really had this damage. They're getting estimates right away. They're trying to get the place rebuilt, and they're keeping up on what the insurance company adjusters have promised, literally keeping a calendar. These are all, tips that I've talked about and pay up, but a lot of people just think that, and they rightly should think. I mean, the service really should be that insurance company adjuster is going to come. There'll be enough adjusters. They're going to be motivated, trained. They have authority to turn checks over to you right away. But the truth is that's not what's happening in the field today. It's the obligation of the insurance companies, but they just don't act that way.
Would you please tell the people what a public adjuster is, and do you recommend that people retain a public adjuster in these situations?
Sure. So there are 3 types of insurance adjusters. You have company adjusters, and they're directly hired by the insurance company. Then you have independent adjusters, and those are adjusters that aren't directly hired by the insurance company, but they represent numerous insurance companies, and some insurance companies who need extra adjusters will hire independent adjusters to come in to help them, especially in catastrophe claims. That's what happens. But each of those 2 adjusters, they each represent the insurance company. They don't represent you, they represent the insurance company. A public adjuster is an individual who's licensed by the state. So you got to get a license, and they are licensed to help policyholders. That's all they do. And so on property insurance claims in particular, because that's what public adjusters primarily do, they will come in and for a percentage, usually 10% or less, will help you put forward your claim. They help forward value it. They will deal with the insurance company adjuster and all the negotiations. I typically find that the public adjusters more than make up in the amount of money they get back above their 10% if they're good. And again, you have to go find a reputable public adjuster, one who's experienced, and there's certain credentials you look for in that. But public adjusting is a profession which has been growing a lot since I first started in this field. 36 years ago. I helped form the Florida Association of Public Adjusters, the Florida Association of Public Insurance Adjusters in 1993 after Hurricane Andrew. And it was, I think at the initial meeting, we had like 42 public adjusters. They're going to have a fall meeting, this year of 420 public adjusters, for that same organization. And at one time after we had 4 hurricanes in Florida in 2004, and I think by 2007, there were over 2,000 licensed public adjusters when they used to have no more than 100 25 years ago.
Wow.
So the profession is actually, the profession is growing. I think it's growing in part because people are recognizing that they don't have the expertise to do it, that the insurance companies really aren't paying motivated people with authority that will go out and really take care of their clients. That's not necessarily true for all companies. Okay. I mean, I do have to say there's some companies out there that I just rarely ever sue. Amica being one of them for personal lines. I mean, I think we've had 2 lawsuits in the last 10 years against Amica. Chubb in the past has done a great job. They're not, they got bought out by another company, and I think their culture is changing, somewhat. But those 2 companies spend a lot of time on underwriting. What I mean is they'll go out and take a look at your home. They'll give you some risk assessment of things they think you can do to help harden it, and things that you can do to help prevent losses from ever happening. But you'll typically pay a little bit of a higher premium, but when the loss happens, I tend to find those customers are the most happy. They really understand their customer, they take care of them, and they don't come to us looking to have to go sue their insurance company. There are others out there that just all they are is advertising on price And I think that's what you were making a very big point about, how inexpensive is an insurance policy at the point that they then have to perform and pay your claim and don't do so, versus you saving 15% with whatever insurance companies out there promising to do it.
Well, that was my point before. I think people should be very careful about focusing on the price of their premiums rather than the payment of their claims. One of the, you talk about commercials on television, and I don't know how good a company Farmers is as compared to State Farm and Allstate, but at least Farmers does commercials about claims they cover rather than how much money they save you in premiums. Because if you save somebody in premiums, but you don't pay your claims, the premiums that you save are worthless. So I think it's very important to focus on the kinds of things you were talking about with Amica and Chubb, is that they happen to be companies that pay claims. Before, we're running out of time, and I think it's important to discuss the times. We live in very unusual times, and strange things are happening around America. We've got a pandemic going on, and people have closed their businesses. We've got civil unrest in places like Portland. We've got travel being restricted and people losing money because they booked travel and couldn't go. Can you talk to us about these unusual events, whether insurance covers them, and how you can get insurance companies to cover stuff like this?
When we come back from this break, we'll see what Chip has to say about that really important question.
It's a very good and it's actually a very important topic, because insurance, you have to think of insurance as being a risk management tool for everybody. It's a social product. So everybody individually pools their resources together and buys insurance that this homogeneous, that we're somewhat similar to each other, we're going to be taken care of if we have these catastrophes. The problem is we don't anticipate all the various catastrophes that might happen out there. We do our best. Corporations, big entities, large enterprises have risk managers on staff that they think about everything possible this way. But most individuals, for homeowners and people that are just working along from paycheck to paycheck, we're really not thinking of these things. But insurance gets involved in every single one of those aspects, so that if you're a business in London and Canada and some other jurisdictions, they're more English-based insurance policies. Many of those businesses with COVID actually got paid at least a part of their lost income claims as a result of that. In the United States, under the foreign policies we have, there's a huge battle going all over the United States, which I'm part of right now, and the policyholders, with about 99% of the time, have been losing those cases so far, but we're involved actively in that battle right now. So don't kid yourself. Insurance should be involved in those things, and people that might have gone out and bought specialty insurance for events that might include such things as a pandemic, closure for almost any reason whatsoever, including, virus exposure, whatever it might be. Some people did actually collect right away, but the vast majority of businesses did not. But we are having these things that if even for riots in insurance in areas, for urban areas, some businesses are finding it difficult to get insurance because of the riots that occurred before, and insurance companies not wanting to, take a bet on those particular businesses in some urban areas in some parts of the United States because of the violence and the vandalism that goes on within riots. So those events do raise the cost of insurance. They harm all of us. They make insurance premiums go up, not just with respect to that, but the dollars that are available to insure everybody else all over the United States. The truth is, because of such crazy things that we've had, including the pandemic, including the wildfires, including, how about in Texas, having that super cold streak that has $40 billion worth of water losses from broken pipes in Texas, to what I talked about on the fracking that goes on with earthquakes, with the hurricanes that are category 5 that seem to be almost coming every single year, which maybe we would have one in a decade. These things all impact insurance because there are more losses that occur. And because it is a social product that's spread out, everybody's property insurance rates throughout the United States, whether you're a business or an individual, they are going up. It's a hard market. There's only so much capital that even the insurance industry in a global sense, has to go ahead and invest into these events, and they're causing future probability tables that indicate that the risk or the losses are going to be greater in the future. So it's an interesting time in insurance right now, and it's really difficult. Even in California, I mean, the insurance regulators, the legislatures, from a public policy standpoint, what are we going to do about the wildfires? Because if insurance companies keep paying out a high frequency of claims with very severe amounts of damage, they can't withstand that. Eventually, they will pull out of the market. So I'm talking about things that I don't, typically do every single day, but I know they're impacting us in a very global sense here in the United States, and it is making the cost of owning property go up as a result of that, because insurance is important. Without you being able to buy the insurance on the property, you're not able to protect your investment. And as we get more affluent, which most people typically do in your life, insurance becomes actually more important, not less important to you.
They're starting to redline this stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, I've thought about, some of the redlining stuff that used to go on in the 1960s. There was some, and by redlining, it's discrimination against areas that were more minority owned, because these were areas that were more prone to riots. And this is especially after the Watts riots and the various riots that we had in the race riots that were going on in the 1960s. And insurance companies, the next thing you know, they just don't sell insurance. And you name it, downtown LA, in East LA, they're not selling insurance. They don't have any insurance, and they're very sophisticated about the way they do it. They don't have any insurance advertisements, no agents there. So where are you going to go buy the insurance if you don't have any insurance agents? But that's coming back again for the first time in a long time. We didn't see a lot of it after the Rodney King stuff, because it's kind of a one-off in the 1990s. But with the civil unrest that happened last year, and the other pressures of other types of losses, insurance companies are being a lot more picky and choosy about where they want to do business and what types of business they want to have.
Theoretically, you could call the refusal to write insurance in a forest area of California redlining, right? I mean, at least maybe that's the wrong term for it, but I mean, they kind of pick and choose where they want to insure you, right?
Yeah, I don't accept it.
Yeah, that's right. There's more than
it's
right. We don't want to pay losses.
It's sort of like insurance. We want to be an insurance company where we don't have to worry about hurricanes. We want to be an insurance company where we don't have to worry about flood. They'll right. Well, they'll take your premium on a risk that's never going to happen. It's they want the sure bet, but most people know that's not what really drives the demand for insurance. What drives the demand for insurance is people being afraid that these risks that are going to happen and the perils that are out there could happen to them. And so you have to go buy it. And frankly, your banker or lender, who most people are financing property, especially if it's a structure,
yes,
they'll require you to have it.
I have a fire. I have wind damage. I have a hurricane runs through South Carolina and levels Bob's home, God forbid. What does the homeowner who has insurance do? What's the first thing he should do?
Call the insurance company or his insurance agent to report the loss. That's the first thing. The second thing, and that's after they make certain they're safe and everything. The safety really is, people don't talk about safety, but if it's a hurricane, get out of the hurricane. If the wildfire is coming to you, don't wait to the last minute. I've represented some families, just devastating stories about, we never thought a fire could move so quick, and it starts moving 20 miles an hour. You don't have much time, to get out of a fire that you can't even see is all of a sudden on top of you in California. It's just really some bizarre stories. So I say, be safe. If the loss happens and you have to then let your insurance agent know about it as soon as you possibly can to get in line. Make sure you're taking the photographs and videotapes after that. I think if it's a significant loss, I think you have, and it's a property damage claim, you have to consider hiring a public adjuster that's competent. After the loss, that's what I would personally do. I'm a very busy attorney. I don't have time to do this. They have certain skill sets that they're going to be able to go do that I don't, because I'm involved in arguing cases and proving them up down the line, but not necessarily in negotiating my own insurance claim. I'm very busy and I'm going to let things slide, which I shouldn't, but I know I will. That is what their job is. And I would probably consider, I would recommend for most people, if it's a significant claim, to call a public adjuster and get help. Before that, though, I would suggest that getting that right insurance agent, so you have the right coverage, you've gone through it, you know where you stand, somebody's explained it to you. That's really where it starts, because then you have some peace of mind that, hey, I've got the right coverage. I know this could happen. If it floods, you got your flood coverage. You're not going to be worrying, oh my God, am I covered or not? And it looks like it was a lot of water damage that didn't come from the air, but came from, this water that, came either from a river or from storm surge or wherever it came from, groundwater. I mean, you name it. I have coverage for it. If it's I can't tell you in your life how important it is, to have that agent so that you at least are aware up front of what the coverages you should expect from your insurance company. So while I say the first step, that's after the loss, the first step for everybody today, who are people listening to this, go check who your insurance agent is, and for heaven's sake, make an appointment. And if you are your own insurance agent, it's like having yourself as an attorney. That's not really a very smart thing to have. Go get yourself and somebody who knows what they're doing, who will get you great coverage at the best price they can find for you.
And an agent is usually your buddy or something like that. I just want to make sure people understand also that with an agent, you have a right, if the agent secures the wrong coverage, to pursue a lawsuit against a negligent agent. Do you not?
We have a number of lawsuits going against negligent agents who have messed up as well too. And I would suggest typically that comes from agents who don't read the product that they're selling, agents who get overworked, and sometimes people just make mistakes. But most of the time that it doesn't happen because good agents do the right thing.
Chip, thank you so much for being with us today on our podcast. We really appreciate it. It was great information. And I hope our listeners take Chip's advice and check your policies, contact your agent, make certain you've got the coverage you need. And if something happens, follow his advice in terms of being safe, taking photos, taking video, getting the records, and following through. Chip, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
What's the name of the book again?
Oh, the name of the book is Pay Up. You can get it on Amazon. It comes in a audio edition and Kindle, or you can get a hard copy.
Yeah, I love it. All right.
Thanks so much.
Take care, guys.
Thanks again, Chip. Hey, we're going to take a quick break here, but I'll be back in a sec with some closing comments. Thank you, Chip Merlin, for joining us today on Justice Counts. It was an informative and fascinating conversation, and Mark Bello and I are grateful that you joined us. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Meanwhile, if you haven't done so already, please check out Mark Bello's Rip from the Headlines legal thrillers, all available online at Amazon and other major online booksellers. He has quite the hero in attorney Zachary Blake, who fights for justice on all fronts. His books are Betrayal of Faith, Betrayal of Justice, Betrayal in Blue, Betrayal in Black, Betrayal High, and Supreme Betrayal. And just out, Betrayal at the Border. For more information, just check markmbello.com. Until next time, this is Bob Gaddy for Mark Bello signing off from Justice Counts.